What if the quiet janitor in your building isn't who you think she is? Imagine, one moment she's mopping floors, the next she's exposing a billion-dollar crime in front of the entire country and changing one CEO's life forever. You won't believe how this story ends. If this story shocked you, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss the next twist. Tell us in the comments, what would you do if you discovered a secret like Grace's? And don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a story that turns everything upside down. The glass doors to the 32nd floor boardroom slammed open so hard they rattled against the wall. Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole International, stormed in like a hurricane, one hand gripping a thick bundle of papers crushed in his fist. His jaw was tight, his tailored suit slightly askew, and his eyes, sharp, furious, swept across the room, packed with executives. He didn't wait. He didn't soften his tone. He strode to the long mahogany table, slammed the papers down so hard the sound cracked through the silence. Does anyone in this entire company know how to translate this? His voice boomed, his anger electric. He held up a page, covered in strange words no one recognized. No one answered. A nervous cough from the corner, a shifting of chairs. Eyes darted between one another, but no one spoke. Ethan's face darkened. He raised his voice, cutting through the heavy air. This document is worth millions of dollars in contracts, and you're all just sitting there? He swept his hand across the room. It's in some obscure language. Basque, maybe. Who knows? I don't care. Translate it, now. And because I'm feeling generous, he slapped the table again, leaning forward, his words biting. Whoever translates this in the next hour gets my entire month's salary. $200,000. Right here, right now. The executives froze. A few exchanged panicked whispers. Some lowered their heads, pretending to read, pretending to think. But the truth was clear. None of them had a clue. Ethan scanned each face, his frustration twisting into open contempt. Nothing? Really? A global firm with hundreds of employees, and not one of you can do this? His tone dripped with sarcasm. Pathetic. The silence was suffocating now. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. A pen dropped somewhere near the far end of the table, and the sound felt deafening. Well, Ethan barked, slamming his palm on the table once more. A few people jumped. $200,000, right now. Or do I have to hire an entirely new team? His words sliced through the tension like a blade. A few nervous laughs bubbled up, quickly dying in their throats. The executives avoided his eyes. Rachel Torres, his assistant, stood stiffly near the door, clutching her tablet, her lips pressed into a worried line. And then, from the back of the room, near the water cooler, came a quiet, steady voice. I can do it. Ethan froze mid-rant. The words cut through the tension, like a sudden gust of wind. Heads turned, one after another, searching for the source. Near the corner, standing in a faded blue janitor uniform, holding a mop, still dripping water onto the polished floor, was Grace Miller. Her posture was calm. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, met Ethan's as if she had just issued her own challenge. For a long moment, no one breathed. The absurdity of it stunned them all. A janitor, just a cleaning lady, standing there claiming she could do what an entire boardroom of executives couldn't. Someone snickered nervously. Another whispered under his breath, "She's kidding, right?" But Grace didn't flinch. She didn't laugh. She didn't look away. I said, she repeated, her voice steady, deliberate, and startlingly confident. I can translate it. The entire room went silent. A silence that thrummed with disbelief and curiosity. Even Ethan, for a split second, seemed caught off guard. His eyes narrowed as he straightened up, studying her like she was a puzzle he hadn't expected. The mop in her hand dripped onto the marble floor. Plop, plop, plop. A sound loud in the stunned quiet. And in that moment, everyone in that boardroom, every executive, every assistant, felt something shift. Surprise, skepticism, a spark of something electric. Ethan crossed his arms, lips curling into a half smirk that didn't quite hide his disbelief. "You?" he said, voice low, almost mocking. Grace nodded once, calm as ever. "Yes, me." The challenge in the air was palpable. The tension tightened, ready to snap. And in that charged instant, no one dared look away. The janitor had just shaken the entire boardroom to its core. Ethan stared at her, a sharp laugh escaping his lips, low and mocking. "You're joking, right? A janitor translating this?" His voice carried across the room, bouncing off the glass walls. Several executives smirked, shaking their heads, whispering under their breath. But Grace didn't flinch. She set her mop aside with a calm that almost felt like defiance and stepped forward. Her shoes squeaked on the polished floor as she approached the table. She held out her hand steadily. "Give me the documents," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. For a moment, Ethan didn't move. He stood there, still smirking, daring her to back down. But the look in her eyes, steady, unshaken, made him hesitate. With a scoff, he snatched the crumpled stack and slapped it into her hand. Grace spread the papers out on the table, scanning them quickly. Her eyes darted from line to line, her lips moving silently as she processed the words. The executives leaned in, curiosity mixing with disbelief. Seconds ticked by, heavy with tension. Then Grace looked up. Her voice was calm, firm, and carried to every corner of the room. "This," she said, tapping the top sheet with her finger, "is a notice of international property transfer. A woman named Elena Garza passed away. She left you an estate in Spain, but," she pointed to a bold line halfway down the page, "the deadline to accept this inheritance is in 1 hour and 45 minutes. The room froze. Ethan blinked, his smirk vanishing as the meaning sank in. He snatched the page back, scanning it desperately, but the foreign words still meant nothing to him. "You're sure?" he demanded, his voice sharper now. Grace met his gaze without fear. "Yes. And if you don't respond before the deadline, the property will be seized by the state." A gasp rippled through the boardroom. Rachel, standing by the door, was already pulling out her phone. Ethan spun on his heel, grabbing his own. "Get me the Spanish consulate, now!" he barked. His voice boomed through the room, his hands trembling as he dialed numbers, pacing like a man on fire. The executives erupted into motion, some whispering frantically, others rushing to their laptops. The tension that had choked the air minutes ago now shifted to a whirlwind of action. Ethan slammed his hand on the speakerphone. "This is Ethan Cole, CEO of Cole International. I need to confirm acceptance of an inheritance. It's urgent. Yes, Basque documents. Verify now." The room went dead silent as they waited for the response. Grace stood quietly, her hands folded, watching him with that same calm that had stunned them all. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he listened, then widened. He pulled the phone away from his ear slowly, like he'd just swallowed glass. "It's real," he said hoarsely. "It's all real." A wave of murmurs swept through the executives. Some looked at Grace like she was some kind of secret weapon they had never known existed. Others simply stared, stunned. Ethan turned back to her, his expression a mix of disbelief and something else. Respect, maybe, or something dangerously close to admiration. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his checkbook, and began writing with rapid strokes. He ripped the check free and held it out to her, his voice rough but steady. 200,000, just like I said. Grace took it, without a flicker of emotion, folded it neatly, and slipped it into her uniform pocket. The executives watched in utter silence, unable to process what they had just witnessed. Ethan's voice softened just a fraction. "Where did you even learn to read this?" Grace met his eyes, her answer simple, unshaken. "I listen while I work. I learn when people think I'm invisible." The boardroom, moments ago filled with doubt and mockery, now simmered with something else entirely. Shock, awe, and a creeping sense that this ordinary janitor was anything but ordinary. And as Ethan stood there, phone still buzzing in his hand, he realized he had just witnessed the first twist in a story he couldn't yet begin to understand. The boardroom had barely settled when Ethan Cole stepped out, still holding his phone like it might answer questions no one else could. The check he'd just handed over was a sting to his pride, but the shock on Grace Miller's face, or rather the lack of it, stuck in his mind. She hadn't smiled. She hadn't even flinched. She had taken $200,000 as casually as if it were spare change. Ethan moved down the hallway, his pace fast and deliberate. "Rachel," he called sharply. His assistant straightened immediately, nearly jogging to keep up with him. "Yes, Mr. Cole?" He stopped near the elevator, eyes locked on hers. His voice dropped to a low, commanding tone. "Find out everything about her. Now." Rachel hesitated, stunned. "You mean Grace?" "You heard me. I want to know where she's from, what she's done, why someone like that is pushing a mop in my building. Don't hold back." Rachel nodded, already typing on her tablet as they stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. Ethan stared at the numbers flashing above, but his mind was elsewhere. He wasn't used to being surprised, and Grace had blindsided him in a way no one ever had. Back in his office, Ethan paced behind his desk. His city skyline view, usually his source of calm, did nothing to settle him. The image of Grace reading that document, cool and confident, replayed in his head over and over. A janitor? No. Something didn't add up. Within the hour, Rachel returned, clutching a slim folder, her expression uneasy. "Sir, I found some things." Ethan snatched the folder and opened it, scanning quickly. His brow furrowed. "Grace Miller, 34, former translator. Wait, Department of State?" Rachel nodded, speaking quickly. She was a senior interpreter. She worked on high-level diplomatic negotiations. She's fluent in Spanish, French, Basque, Catalan, and at least 3 others. She traveled internationally for years. Her performance reviews were impeccable. Ethan's fingers tightened on the paper. Then why is she here? Rachel shifted uncomfortably. That's where it gets strange. About 5 years ago, she resigned without explanation. No record of another job in her field. Nothing. Until she shows up on payroll here as a janitor. Ethan closed the folder, staring at the wall. A pulse of curiosity surged through him. This woman wasn't just competent. She was extraordinary. And she'd buried herself here, invisible, cleaning his floors. Why? His chair screeched as he spun around and stood. "Set up another test," he ordered. Rachel blinked. "A test?" "Yes, a meeting. A client who needs a live translator. Something big, something tricky. I want her in that room." His voice sharpened. "If she's what this says she is, I need to see it with my own eyes." Later that afternoon, Ethan stood in his office, staring down at the city, adrenaline still humming in his veins. He thought about her face when she said, "I listen while I work. I learn when people think I'm invisible." Those words hit harder than he'd expected. He had mocked her, doubted her, and she'd still delivered. That night, long after the building emptied, Ethan stayed late. He couldn't focus on the contracts in front of him. Instead, his mind drifted back to Grace's steady voice, her unwavering gaze, and that strange mixture of humility and strength. He poured himself a coffee, leaning on the window, watching the lights of downtown flicker. "Who are you, Grace Miller?" The next morning, Rachel knocked on his door, her voice brisk. "Mr. Cole, I scheduled a meeting with the Japanese delegation. Friday at 10. They're bringing complex trade documents. I've informed Grace she's needed." Ethan felt a rush of something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. Good. Perfect. As Rachel left, Ethan allowed himself a rare grin. This wasn't just about a translation anymore. It was about uncovering the mystery standing right under his nose. The woman who had turned his boardroom upside down and walked away with his respect and his curiosity. He was done being blindsided. Next time, he'd be ready. And deep down, he couldn't wait to see what Grace Miller would do next. Friday morning arrived, sharp and tense. The 28th floor conference room of Cole International buzzed with preparation, laptops opened, coffee cups half empty, executives flipping through binders with nervous hands. This wasn't just any meeting. The Japanese and German delegates were here to finalize a multi-million-dollar trade agreement. Every detail mattered. Ethan Cole stood at the head of the table, calm on the outside, but restless underneath. He scanned the room, eyes darting from the 2 official interpreters, nervously rehearsing phrases to the clock ticking toward 10 a.m. Then the door opened, and in stepped Grace Miller, still in her plain navy blouse and slacks, No jewelry, no fanfare. Just that quiet presence that somehow drew every eye. A few executives exchanged looks. A janitor here? But Ethan's voice cut through the murmurs. "Ms. Miller, take a seat." The meeting began. Introductions were made, documents exchanged. The Japanese delegate spoke first, rapid and precise, outlining technical regulations for import restrictions. The lead interpreter hesitated, flipping through his notes, fumbling over a key phrase. A tense silence filled the room. The delegate's brow furrowed. The German side shifted in their seats, clearly losing confidence. Ethan's fingers drummed on the table. He was seconds away from stepping in when Grace's voice, steady and fluent, filled the air. What he's saying is that the shipment must meet the revised safety standards effective this quarter, specifically Clause 3.7 of the International Materials Act. Everyone turned toward her. Grace didn't flinch. She continued seamlessly, switching from Japanese to English and then to German, clarifying each nuance with crystal clarity. Her words flowed, confident and exact, weaving through languages like they were threads in her hands. The German interpreter glanced down, cheeks reddening. He had missed the same clause entirely. Ethan leaned back slightly, his pulse quickening, not from fear this time, but from something far rarer, admiration. The Japanese delegate nodded, visibly relieved. The discussion moved forward: pricing structures, environmental compliance, export certifications. Each time a technical term surfaced, the interpreters faltered, and each time Grace stepped in. Her voice steady, her tone respectful but certain. She didn't just translate. She explained, giving context, ensuring no detail was lost. She pointed to specific pages, highlighted key sections, and even rephrased confusing terms until both delegations nodded in agreement. The tension in the room shifted. Skepticism dissolved into focus. The German negotiator, impressed, leaned forward. "Ask them if the legal framework allows an expedited schedule." Grace didn't even pause. She turned, delivered the question in flawless Japanese, listened carefully, then translated back. "They agree, provided the environmental audits are completed in 2 weeks." The executives around the table exchanged stunned looks. This wasn't just a janitor filling in. This was a professional operating at the highest level, right in front of them. Ethan's heart pounded. He had seen skilled interpreters before, but nothing like this. Grace was calm under pressure, quick and utterly unshakable. When the final signatures were placed on the documents, the room erupted in applause. Both delegations standing to shake hands, smiling wide. A contract worth millions had just been sealed, and it was clear to everyone who had made it possible. Ethan stood, his eyes finding Grace across the table. For a brief second, the chaos faded, and all he saw was her. Focused, brilliant, composed. His chest tightened with something unexpected. Grace gathered the scattered papers, tucking them into a neat stack. She caught Ethan's gaze for a fraction of a second, then looked away, her expression unreadable. But Ethan didn't look away. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. A spark of respect, curiosity, and something far more dangerous: hope. And as the room emptied and the delegates filed out, he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Grace Miller wasn't just part of this meeting. She had just changed everything. 2 days after the international deal was signed, Coal International's 35th floor boardroom no longer felt like a place of celebration. Behind closed doors, the atmosphere was heavy, almost poisonous. Henry Watts, the CFO, slammed a thick file onto the polished table, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This is getting out of hand," Henry hissed, his face flushed with anger. "A janitor sitting in on million-dollar meetings? Are we out of our minds?" Linda Pierce, the head of operations, crossed her arms, her tone icy. "It makes the company look unstable. Clients talk, investors listen. They'll wonder what kind of circus we're running here." Carl Benson, head of legal, adjusted his tie with deliberate calm, but his words were no less brutal. "It's a liability. She's not under the same NDAs as our official staff. If something leaks..." Henry cut him off. "Exactly. We can't let this continue. Ethan might be impressed by her little trick, but this is business. We need control." The three of them sat in tense silence for a moment. Papers rustled. A clock ticked loudly. Then Linda leaned forward, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. "We can remove her quietly. Restructure the cleaning department. Outsource it. No one will ask questions." Carl nodded slowly. "It's clean. No performance issues on record, but budget cuts. Who's going to challenge that?" Henry didn't hesitate. He pulled a form from his folder and clicked his pen. "Do it. Terminate her position by Friday, and make sure Ethan doesn't know until it's done." Linda signed first, her pen scraping across the page. Carl followed, his signature quick and final. Henry scrawled his name last, with a satisfied grunt. The decision was sealed in seconds. What they didn't notice was the faint creak of the door just beyond the hall. Rachel Torres stood frozen, holding a stack of reports. She had come to deliver them, but stopped when she heard Grace's name. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears as she listened to every word. Terminate her, outsource, hide it from Ethan. The words repeated in her mind like a drumbeat. When Henry's voice dropped lower, Rachel stepped back, her hands shaking. She knew she shouldn't be listening, but she couldn't stop. Grace didn't deserve this. She had saved a deal worth millions, done more than half the people in that room ever could. And now they wanted to throw her out like trash. The moment the signatures were done, Henry gathered the papers. "Make sure HR has this by noon," he barked. Linda and Carl stood, smoothing their suits, already talking about lunch reservations, as if they hadn't just ended someone's livelihood. Rachel turned and bolted down the hallway, her heels pounding against the marble floor. She didn't care who saw her. She pushed through a group of interns, nearly dropping the reports in her hands. Her chest was tight, adrenaline surging. She found Ethan in his office, standing by the window, deep in thought. She didn't bother knocking. She burst through the door, breathless. "Mr. Cole," she gasped, clutching the papers like a lifeline. "You need to know what they're doing." Ethan spun around, startled. "Rachel, what happened?" Her words tumbled out in a rush. "Henry, Linda, Carl, they just signed a termination order. They're firing Grace. They're hiding it as a restructure. They don't want you to find out until it's too late." For a heartbeat, Ethan didn't move. Then his jaw tightened, and his eyes hardened like steel. He stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "What did you say?" Rachel's voice shook, but she repeated it word for word. "They want her gone, sir. By Friday." Ethan's hand clenched into a fist at his side. "Not on my watch." In that moment, the calm, calculating CEO vanished. What replaced him was something far more relentless, a man ready to fight. And as he stormed past Rachel, striding toward the elevator, one thought burned in his mind. They picked the wrong woman to mess with, and they picked the wrong man to cross. Ethan's footsteps echoed like gunshots down the stairwell as he sprinted past floor after floor. He didn't wait for the elevator. He didn't have time. His chest burned, his pulse hammered in his ears, but he didn't slow down. He had to reach her before they did. When he burst into the basement level, the smell of cleaning supplies hit him, sharp and sterile. He scanned the room, empty shelves, stacked buckets, a faint hum of fluorescent lights. Then, near the far corner, he saw her. Grace Miller stood by a battered locker, calmly folding her uniform into a bag. Beside her, a small boy, Sammy, maybe 7 or 8, clutched a worn backpack and watched silently. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Grace!" His voice cracked through the air, urgent, almost desperate. "Wait!" She didn't flinch. She zipped her bag with a practiced motion, her movement steady, controlled. Ethan crossed the room in long strides, stopping just a few feet away. "They're trying to fire you. I just found out. I'll fix this. Don't go." Grace finally looked up. Her eyes were calm but cold, like she'd already built walls he couldn't break. "Mr. Cole," she said softly, "you don't need to fix anything." Ethan shook his head, stepping closer. "You don't understand. This is political. They're threatened by you. But I'm still the CEO. I'll overturn it. Just give me time." Grace's lips tightened into a faint, bitter smile. "Time?" Her voice was quiet, but every word hit like a blade. "You think I've had time all these years cleaning floors and pretending not to exist?" Ethan opened his mouth, but she cut him off, her tone sharp now, laced with a pain he hadn't expected. "I don't need your sympathy, Ethan. I don't need a man in a suit rushing down here to save me at the last second." His chest tightened. "Grace, that's not what this is." "Then what is it?" she snapped, her voice rising. Sammy flinched slightly, but she gently touched his shoulder, steadying him. Her eyes locked on Ethan's, unwavering. "You think because you wrote a check and defended me in a meeting that you understand what respect is? Respect isn't a favor, Mr. Cole. It's how you treat someone when nobody's watching." Ethan took a step closer, desperate, his words tumbling out. "I'm not like them, Grace. I see you. I know what you've done for this company, what you've done for me." She shook her head, her jaw tight. "You saw me when it benefited you. But where were you when they whispered behind my back? When they laughed? When I walked into a room and everyone wondered why the janitor was there?" Her words pierced deeper than she could know. Ethan froze, unable to answer. She slung the strap of her bag over her shoulder, her movements efficient, final. Sammy looked up at her, his small voice breaking the silence. "Mom, are we leaving now?" Grace knelt beside him, smoothing his hair with trembling fingers. "Yes, sweetheart, we're leaving." Ethan's throat tightened. He took another step forward, his hand half raised as if reaching for her would stop her from walking out. "Grace, please. Don't go. Stay. Let me fight for you." She stood, lifting Sammy's backpack onto her shoulder with one hand and clutching her own bag in the other. Her eyes softened just a fraction, enough to let him see the hurt beneath her calm exterior. "I don't need anyone to fight for me," she said quietly. "I've been fighting for myself long before you ever noticed I existed." Ethan's hand dropped, his heart pounded, but his legs felt cemented to the floor as she stepped past him. He caught a faint trace of her perfume, simple, clean, before she moved toward the exit. He wanted to call her name, to stop her, to explain everything building inside him that he didn't know how to say, but the words tangled in his throat, dying before they reached the air. Grace pushed open the heavy door. Sunlight spilled in from the parking lot beyond, catching the edges of her dark hair. She held Sammy's hand as they walked out, their figures framed by the bright light. Ethan stood frozen in the dim basement, staring after them, every sound in the building muffled by the weight in his chest. The door swung shut with a soft click, leaving him in silence. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt powerless, completely and utterly powerless, as he watched the one person who had truly changed him walk away without looking back. That night, long after the basement farewell, Grace sat alone at her kitchen table in their modest apartment on the south side of Chicago. The clock read 11:47 p.m. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as she stared at the envelope with her final paycheck and the folded uniform she would never wear again. Sammy was asleep in the next room, his small night light casting a soft glow through the crack in the door. Her phone buzzed on the table, the sudden vibration making her jump. Unknown number. For a moment, her finger hovered over decline, but something, intuition maybe, made her answer. "Ms. Miller?" The voice was firm, male, professional. "This is Special Agent Whitaker with the FBI. We need to speak with you about global trade." Her heart stopped. Global trade. That name was supposed to stay buried in her past. I don't know anything," she whispered, her voice tight. "On the contrary," the agent said, his tone steady. "We know you used to handle confidential translations for international contracts. We've uncovered evidence of a massive money laundering scheme. Your name appears in files as someone who raised internal complaints. We believe you're a key witness." Grace's knuckles whitened around the phone. Her eyes flicked toward Sammy's room. He slept peacefully, unaware that his mother's world was tilting again. "Agent Whitaker, if I do this, they'll know where I am." There was a pause on the line, then. "We can offer protection, but without your testimony, we can't stop them. You wanted the truth out once, didn't you?" Grace closed her eyes, her chest heaving. This was her chance, her shot at finally clearing her name. But it was also stepping into the very storm she had spent years hiding from. "I have a child," she whispered. "We'll keep him safe," the agent promised. But we need you at the federal courthouse tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp." Grace ended the call with trembling hands. She looked toward Sammy's room again. He had been through so much: therapy, school changes, watching her struggle. Could she risk his safety? Could she live with herself if she stayed silent? Sleep never came. By dawn, she had made her choice. The next morning, the sky over downtown Chicago was a pale gray. News vans already lined the street outside the federal courthouse. Reporters set up cameras, unaware that their headlines were about to explode. Grace stepped out of a black sedan, escorted by 2 FBI agents. She wore a simple gray blazer, her hair pulled back, her face pale but resolute. The press immediately erupted. Shouts, flashes, microphones shoved toward her. "Ms. Miller, why are you here? Were you involved? Did you work for global trade?" She kept walking, eyes forward, every step measured. Sammy was safe with a trusted neighbor. She had kissed his forehead that morning like it might be the last time. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. Cameras clicked. The gallery was packed with journalists, investors, and stunned onlookers. Grace took the stand, her hand steady as she was sworn in. "Please state your name for the record." "Grace Miller." Her voice rang clear, steady. The prosecutor stepped forward. "Ms. Miller, were you employed as a translator for Global Trade International 5 years ago?" "Yes." "And during your employment, did you discover irregularities in financial documents?" She took a deep breath. "Yes. I discovered contracts used to funnel millions of dollars through shell companies overseas. I reported it internally. I was told to be quiet." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Cameras zoomed in on her face. "Do you have evidence?" Grace nodded and pulled a small external drive from her purse. Her hands no longer shook. "This contains emails, audio recordings, and contract scans proving global trade executives coordinated illegal transfers. I kept them hidden." The prosecutor approached, taking the drive as if it were a live grenade. "Ms. Miller, do you understand the impact of what you're revealing?" She met his gaze. "I do, and I'm not hiding anymore." The room erupted, reporters whispering furiously, phones buzzing, cameras flashing. Ethan Cole, watching from his office via live stream, felt his breath catch. Grace wasn't just the woman who saved his deal. She was the woman risking everything to expose corruption that reached across continents. Her testimony rolled on for hours, each revelation sharper than the last. Names of executives, bank accounts, dates, transactions. With every word, the weight of years in hiding lifted from her shoulders. When she stepped down from the stand, the country was already on fire with headlines. "Former state translator exposes global trade scandal. Billions laundered." "Grace Miller, the whistleblower who shocked the nation." And as she walked past the cameras once more, she felt the sting of fear. But also something else, a spark of pride, a sense that maybe, just maybe, she had taken back her life. But somewhere in that crowd, Ethan Cole watched with a pounding heart, knowing this was far from the end. Grace Miller had just become the most powerful woman in the room, and the whole world was finally seeing her. The live broadcast ended, but Ethan Cole was still staring at the screen in his office, frozen. Grace's final words on the witness stand echoed in his mind. "I'm not hiding anymore." He didn't wait to think. He grabbed his keys, bolted out the door, and was in his black SUV within seconds, weaving through late afternoon Chicago traffic like a man possessed. The hotel, where the FBI housed protected witnesses, wasn't far, but every red light felt like a lifetime. His hands tightened around the wheel. He thought about the way she looked in that courtroom. Strong, unshakable, absolutely radiant under pressure. His heart pounded. He had lost her once in that basement. He wasn't going to lose her again. 15 minutes later, he screeched into the hotel parking lot. 2 federal agents stationed near the entrance moved immediately, hands on their earpieces. Ethan didn't flinch. "Ethan Cole," he said, voice commanding but controlled. "I need to see Grace Miller." One agent hesitated. The other studied him, then nodded toward the lobby. "She's in room 1209. But don't try anything. She's under federal protection." Ethan didn't even answer. He was already moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time, lungs burning, sweat beading at his collar. By the time he reached the 12th floor, his heart was racing for a reason that had nothing to do with running. He stopped outside her door, breath caught in his throat. For a second, he almost turned back. What if she told him to leave again? What if she slammed the door in his face? But he had to try. He raised his hand and knocked. There was movement inside, the shuffle of feet. Then the door opened a few inches, the chain still on. Grace stood there, framed by the soft glow of a lamp behind her. Her eyes widened in shock. "Ethan?" "Grace," he said, stepping closer, voice low but urgent. "I saw everything. I watched you stand up there in front of the whole country, and I realized I don't want to just fight for you in that company. I want to fight for you in my life." She blinked, lips parting, but no sound came. "Come back to Cole International," he continued, his words tumbling out faster now. "Not because of translations, not because you saved us once. Come back because I need you there, because I need you with me." Grace's eyes softened, but her voice was steady, a whisper that cut through him like steel. "Ethan, I can't go back to being someone's backup plan. I won't be a tool you pull out when the company's on fire." "You won't be," he said immediately, shaking his head. "I'm not asking you to be anyone's savior. I'm asking you to be my equal." Her hand tightened on the doorframe. She stepped out, closing the door gently behind her, standing in the hallway with him. For the first time since she'd left that basement, they were face to face with no audience, no contracts, no board of directors, just them. Ethan's chest heaved as he reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't plan this. He hadn't thought it through. But as his fingers brushed the small velvet box he'd been carrying for months, just in case, he knew this was the moment. He dropped to one knee on the hotel's worn carpet, not caring who might walk by. Her eyes widened, her breath catching as she covered her mouth with her hand. "Grace Miller," he said, voice cracking under the weight of everything he felt. "I don't just want you back at the company. I want you in my life, every day, every night, in every fight, in every victory. Not as an employee, not as someone who saved my career, but as the woman I can't stop thinking about." Her eyes filled with tears. He opened the box. The diamond caught the dim hallway light and sparkled like fire. "Will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop. Grace's hand trembled against her lips. For a moment, the strong, unshakable woman from the courtroom was gone, replaced by someone overwhelmed, vulnerable, and deeply moved. She took a breath, her voice soft but steady. "Ethan, She closed her eyes for a second, letting the emotions crash over her. Anger, relief, hope, fear, all at once. When she opened them again, they glistened. "Let me think about it." Ethan looked up at her, a slow smile spreading across his face, despite the ache in his chest. "Take all the time you need. I'll wait." For the first time, in what felt like forever, Grace smiled, small, real, and filled with something new. Fair enough. And in that quiet hotel hallway, with the world still buzzing about her testimony, Grace Miller and Ethan Cole stood close, both knowing that their story was far from over. 6 months later, the rooftop of Griffin Corp had been transformed into something out of a dream. The Chicago skyline glittered under the setting sun, strings of soft white lights swaying gently in the evening breeze. Rows of white chairs lined the edge of the terrace, filled with employees, friends, and people who had followed every headline of Grace's story. A live band played quietly, but all eyes were on the aisle. The glass doors opened. Grace Miller stepped out in a simple, elegant white gown, her hair pulled back in a low bun, her eyes shimmering with tears she didn't bother to hide. Every step she took was steady, confident, like a woman who had fought storms and finally found her harbor. Walking just ahead of her was Sammy, clutching a small satin pillow with 2 rings tied carefully on top. His little suit was slightly crooked, but his smile lit up the entire rooftop. He looked back at her once, grinning. "You look like a princess, Mom," he whispered. Grace's heart clenched. "And you look like the bravest boy in the world." At the end of the aisle, Ethan Cole waited, tall and striking in a dark tuxedo, his expression raw with emotion. When their eyes met, the noise of the city seemed to fade bit. He remembered the first time he saw her in that basement with a mop in her hand. Now she was walking toward him in white, the very definition of strength and grace. As Grace reached him, Ethan took her hands, his voice low but carrying across the rooftop. "Grace Miller," he began, his words trembling but sure. "The day you walked into my boardroom and turned my world upside down, I didn't know you were saving more than a contract. You were saving me. Today, in front of everyone, I promise I will love you, respect you, and stand by you for the rest of my life. No boardroom, no scandal, no storm will ever change that." Grace's hands tightened around his, her own voice thick with emotion. "Ethan Cole, I walked through fire to stand here. I lost everything once, and I thought my story was over. But you showed me that even broken pieces can build something stronger. I promise to love you, to challenge you, to stand beside you, and together, to build a world better than the one we found." The officiant smiled. "Do you, Ethan Cole, take Grace Miller?" The words blurred into a wave of cheers and quiet sobs as they exchanged vows, slipped rings onto each other's fingers, and sealed it all with a kiss. The rooftop exploded with fireworks, red, gold, and silver lighting up the Chicago night. Sammy jumped in the air, fists raised high. "Yeah!" he shouted, his laugh pure and unstoppable. The guests roared with applause as Ethan swept Grace into his arms for another kiss, this one deeper, fiercer, like two people who had fought the world and won. Photographers snapped pictures, but in that moment, none of them cared about cameras or headlines. Ethan and Grace stood in the glow of the fireworks, holding each other, knowing the hardest battles were behind them. Sammy ran up, wrapping his arms around both of them. "Can we go eat cake now?" he asked, and everyone laughed, the sound carrying into the night. As the celebration swirled around them, music, laughter, the Chicago skyline glowing like magic, Grace looked out over the crowd of people who had once whispered doubts and gossip about her. Now, they were clapping, smiling, inspired. She turned to Ethan, her voice low so only he could hear. "We did it." Ethan kissed her temple. "No, you did it. You changed everything." Grace glanced at Sammy, at the employees who now respected her as more than a title, at the life she had built from ashes. Her chest swelled with something fierce and bright, and in that moment, she wanted the world to remember this one truth: never underestimate anyone. The person you overlook today might be the very one who changes your life forever. The band struck up a lively tune, fireworks still crackling overhead, and the newlywed trio stepped into their future, together, unstoppable and unforgettable. Life often hides extraordinary strength in ordinary places. Grace's journey reminds us never to underestimate anyone. Every person you meet may carry talents and courage that could change everything. Her story teaches us that dignity matters more than titles, that standing up for what's right can rewrite your future, and that respect builds the strongest bonds. In our own lives, we can choose to treat others with fairness, see beyond appearances, and fight for what we believe in, even when it's hard. What lesson from Grace's story touched you most? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories.